Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and I'll be your guide on this journey from consciousness to cluelessness and back around again. Today on the podcast, I talk to Aryenish Birdie. Aryenish is the founder and executive director of Encompass, a nonprofit working to make the animal protection movement more racially diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Prior to Encompass, Aryenish spent 7 years at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, promoting alternatives to animal tests. I really enjoyed not only talking to Aryenish about all the things she's accomplished, but just the mindset she has and the way she sees the world is really inspiring. Enjoy! Well, thank you again for joining me this morning. I'm really excited to connect.
Me as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So the podcast is called Consciously Clueless, and that comes from this place of me kind of being on this journey of like, wow, I'm with it, I'm together, and then also knowing like some days you're just clueless and you have no idea what's going on and everything in between. So I like starting with asking guests kind of, where are you at right now in this moment from conscious to clueless? Where are you feeling?
That's a great question. I'm probably pretty solidly in between. I think I feel I feel a little bit of both in different respects, personally and professionally. I'm feeling good. I'm also feeling I need to do more to take care of myself and be more well rested. And I don't know how to do that. So it's like, I know I'm conscious that I need to, and I don't know with what logistical changes in my life I can make that a reality. So feeling kind of in between there.
Yeah, I totally get that. There's this moment, I feel like sometimes when you're getting to kind of almost like that breaking point where you're like, I know something has to happen. Like maybe that's just a good first step to know that something has to change.
Exactly.
So I connected with you, or I was connected with you because of your work with Encompass. Can you tell me a little bit about that organization and your history with them?
Yeah, so I founded Encompass back in 2017. I've been an animal advocate since 1997, working on all different animal issues, from circuses, fur farms, zoos, puppy mills, animals in experimentation, pretty much any way in which animals are used and abused in society. I've worked to eliminate that or create better conditions at the very least.
Wow.
And throughout that whole journey, I've always been one of the very few women of color, people of color in the room when animals were being discussed. And intuitively, I always knew that there was a missed opportunity there, but I didn't fully know how to articulate that. So, just as I got older and I had more conversations and I read more, and I ended up going to a very progressive liberal arts college, Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, I learned more about how interconnected systems of oppression are, how interconnected our liberations are. And with that understanding, I started to realize maybe there is a way to have a more concrete conversation about these topics, especially racial justice, racial equity in the context of animal liberation, which is really what we're fighting for. And so, I started to think through what it would look like to make specific actionable changes for the animal movement, for the animal protection movement. And with that came the birth of this organization. And it's been a really fun, wild ride. So we work to support people of the global majority, which is the term we use instead of people of color, to be more globally inclusive, since that people of color is a US-centric term. And so we work to support ourselves, this community, individually by creating, we have a caucus where people come together to build community, to build resiliency, to build our leadership skills. And we also work to support white organizations and white individuals in better understanding and articulating how they are very integral to our, to eliminating racism and the
Right.
role that they play in that. So we kind of take a dual approach, and it's been a really fun last few years. Very exhausting, but very fun.
Yeah, I will totally admit that, I of course do some research on people before I interview them. I did not realize you founded the dang organization.
Yeah.
I think that it's so beautiful. And of course, this is like compressing, I'm sure, all of the work that went into it, but it's beautiful that you saw a missing link, so you created it.
Yeah.
Which is
that's
incredible.
What I really was trying. So I worked at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is
okay.
They promote plant-based nutrition diets, supporting doctors in their journey, and they also work to fight animal experimentation. And I worked on the animal experimentation side, and I was a lobbyist there for them, working on a bill that regulated industrial chemicals. So that's chemicals in paint and in wood varnish and carpets. Pretty much everything we use has been tested on animals or has ingredients that have been. And so there was a big effort in Congress to reform the way those chemicals are regulated. And in that process, there was a recommendation to test a lot of chemicals on animals. And so we were trying to promote human relevant alternatives to the use of live animals for those tests. And we were successful. And I was actually invited by President Obama's White House to watch him sign that bill into law. It was in 2016.
Oh my gosh.
And after that, I felt like, I think I've done what I came to this organization to do. And now I think I need to find the next step for me. And I wanted to do something that no one else was doing, as if I didn't do it, it wouldn't happen. I was trying to find those gaps, those white space. And so, this thing that had been in the back of my mind around feeling alone and that lack of belonging in the animal movement, that just kept really speaking very loudly. And so I knew I had to listen to that, and ended up, creating an organization.
I also think it's pretty amazing to be at a place where, you're working for this amazing organization, you're doing good work, you're kind of able to see the fruits of your labor, and yet you still realized when it was your time to move on. You're like, okay, this moment is complete, my work here is complete, what's next? I think that it can be tricky to listen to that and to recognize those moments.
Very much so. Yeah, it was very difficult to leave. I had an amazing boss. I really liked my coworkers. My benefits were amazing. My salary was amazing. It was like, it was not that I was leaving because I was unhappy. It was just that I felt like I had to do something else. And that was very difficult. And I was really only able to do it because I had extremely low rent. I was in a rent stabilized apartment. I had savings that I knew I could rely on. I had a partner who was very supportive. I had pretty much all the conditions right for me to take that big risk. I never fundraised a single dollar before I had started.
Oh, wow.
So it was a lot of just leap of faith and listening to my intuition. And I'm very lucky, very privileged. And it all has been a very intense, wild ride.
Is that something that you've always been skilled at, that kind of like ability to listen to your intuition, or is it something you've cultivated over time?
Both. I think I'm grateful to be someone. My parents were born and raised in Pakistan, and moved to the US in 1985, when they were in their mid-20s. And I don't know how to articulate it. They were very connected to they are very connected to their own roots. They don't ascribe as much to the like hyper Western beliefs of like what you see as real. And I guess especially my dad he's just been very interested in like Sufi principles and yoga and Buddhism. And so a lot of that has kind of been instilled in me. And I very much believe that Mother Universe is real, and to listen to like know that I have wisdom inside me and to listen to it and to not override that with rational thoughts at all times. And there is a balance, of course. And then also through that, I've also worked to better cultivate that and to better understand that my gut is speaking to me and that there is something in there. And so, yeah, all of that kind of very much lives on in me today.
It's amazing how much can come from teaching people young to just trust themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also, really how I came to care so much about animals. I think most children really do. And it's something that's taught out of us that, oh, well, you do have to eat animals and you do just have to accept that animals are used in this way. And I think at an early age, if we were able to teach children, no, you're right, animals do deserve love and they can feel pain and joy, we would live in a very different world.
Absolutely. So where does your vegan story begin?
It really begins back in 1997. I was presented with the frog dissection project in the 7th grade. And
oh no.
My mom was very opposed to it. And it was really her fighting my biology teacher and just the school that I was mostly very curious by her objection. She learned about, I guess I could go back even further. My parents really fell in love in Pakistan, taking care of the stray dogs who lived on the streets there. It's very, stray dogs on the streets is very common. And they both just very much loved animals, primarily dogs. And they wanted to go vegetarian. It's a very meat-centric culture, and they weren't able to. So they thought, okay, when we come to the US, it'll be a little easier. And my mom had some coworkers who were like, no, you can't do it. You can't raise a child that way. She'll have brain defects and just like all the health stuff. Like she will be malnourished and blah, blah, blah.
And this was in the US? Your mom had those
coworkers? This was in the US.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Kansas. So this is where all of those conversations were happening. And so my mom was like, okay, I guess I shouldn't do that. But we never bought products tested on animals, like household products or cosmetics. So there was some little awareness there. And so when this came about, my mom was like, there's literally no reason 7th graders should be cutting open once living creatures. There's no value to that exercise. Yeah. And so mainly because I was curious by her objection, I started to get more information from some of the big animal organizations like PETA and the Humane Society in the United States, and even PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And so once I started getting information on that, I was just like, oh my goodness, how is all this happening behind closed doors? I love animals. I had 2 dogs who I would have done almost anything for, And so once I got information on the dissection, I started getting, things in the mail about, like I said, circuses and zoos and factory farms. And it just was, once I saw those images, I was just like, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. These are the most vulnerable creatures. They are used and abused in such high number. How can I do anything but fight for them? So once I learned about that, I went vegetarian, and then I went vegan, and
this is still in middle school?
Yeah, middle school.
Okay.
And in Kansas. And it's just been pretty much like a very singular focus for me. Of course, bringing in how all of us are complicit, but also integral in these institutions.
Right.
Factory farming doesn't happen in a silo. It happens because there's so many layers of harm that happen from workers and the environment. And so, it's all very interconnected.
Yeah. And, I have hearing that story of your mom and wanting to kind of be vegetarian and thinking about raising her child vegetarian. And I have compassion for her, not only, as an immigrant and trying to navigate that in and of itself, but also just of that generation. I think there was a lot of shame for anybody who wanted to kind of step away from the Western diet.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine raising a kid and having someone tell you, well, if you don't do this, your kid's going to have brain damage, and then thinking that that's real. And worrying about that and not having the information. And, I think there's a disconnect sometimes in my experience, because generations above me, it seems sometimes there's like this shame. Like, I wish I would have known, but it's like, I'm not passing judgment that you and myself and everybody else have been cogs in the machine.
Right.
That, like, that is not a judgment, but okay, now we have new information. Now what can we do?
Right. Exactly.
So that's a hard line to toe when you're telling people everything you've known for the last 50 years of your life has been bullshit. Everything about food and farming and everything you knew is kind of a lie. That's a hard place to be. It rocked my world.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you came to it so young. I think that gives you a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really grateful for that. And my parents were always so supportive. They're now vegetarian. My sister is vegan. It's very, and it's really just something we talk about all the time. So I'm very lucky, and also just very close with them. So it's nice.
I love that. So this organization, Encompass, what kind of work, you explained kind of, what the mission is. What kind of work does that translate to? What events, what community stuff, like what are you doing to create this world of this intersectionality and talking about people of color within the animal rights movement and all that? Like, what does that look like for Encompass?
Yeah, great question. So we have two ways that we work. So within the caucus, I'll start there, the caucus, which is the global majority caucus for people who identify as being part of the global majority. We have a few different programs. We have a community, we have community building opportunities where quarterly we get together and really just share where we're at in a space that's only made up of people who are like us. And it's honestly, every single time, it's a very healing space for a lot of people just to have that space and be heard and to feel less alone.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. We can really, in a way, just have a pause and reclaim parts of ourselves that have been repressed, or just support one another in embracing, who we really are. And it's just a really special space. We also have a talent database, which is open to people of the global majority to get more connected to opportunities that we may not be well aware of. So professional opportunities like jobs,
Oh, okay.
Also speaking opportunities, like speaking at conferences or podcasts, board positions. It's really a way for us to try to make the connections, because a lot of what we see in almost all spaces is you really have to know someone to get into a position. But what happens
Yeah.
when we're all siloed? There
Yep.
isn't that ability to even just know about opportunities. So we're trying to serve as an intermediary and make that bridge. And we also are currently running an executive cohort for people of the global majority who are more advanced in their careers, or who have started a nonprofit or trying to start a project, get the unique skills that they need to advance their cause. So we're running a 4-month segment on that right now. It's actually going to be wrapping up in June 2021. And it's culminating with a pitch day where we're connecting anyone who's interested with funders who can make their pitch of their organization so they can get access to funding. So in the cohort, we're talking about fundraising challenges, coaching, the ABCs of nonprofit, just pretty much everything that it takes to run something.
That sounds amazing. Like what a resource.
Yeah, it's been, and then we're also trying to connect, we're trying to build that knowledge base so that people know, okay, I can go to someone else. I don't have to come to Encompass, because we don't want to be everyone coming to us. We want to also say, you at X person at one organization, you have a lot of skills that Y person at a budding organization has. You two should connect with one another and share those skills and resources. So yeah, it's been a really great way. We have a Slack community so people can stay connected and speak to one another directly. It's been really fun, and I'm really excited to see how that kind of continues to flourish after the session itself ends.
Is this just for people from Maryland, or is this national or international?
It's national. Yes.
Okay.
Everything we do is national, and actually some of what we do is international, but for sure nationally.
Okay.
Yeah. And then on the other side, we are kind of a consultancy for organizations that allows us to reach white run and led groups with some more depth. And so we also, so we do the consulting work to helping organizations better understand what their unique needs are, help them identify. We have an assessment where we go through kind of all the levels of the organization and say, these are the things that you can improve on. These are the things that you're doing well. Here's what our recommendations are. We also offer trainings once or twice a year. We actually just finished one last week. That's kind of a racial equity 101. Okay. And then we also have a 201 for people who've gone through the beginner's course to advance those principles and have actionable plans that they can take to their organizations to implement racial equity concepts. And then we are also doing movement-wide research right now, where we're looking at the state of the animal protection movement, the farm animal protection movement, and where we are right now so that we can benchmark over the course of time and see if we're making advancements. So right now we've actually brought on a really awesome racial equity firm, the Equity-Based Dialogues for Inclusion.
Okay.
And they're doing surveys and research, focus groups and interviews with a number of organizations and individuals in the movement so that we can better understand what the state of diversity and equity is in our movement right now.
So when you say movement, animal rights movement.
So this right now we're primarily focusing in on the farmed animal protection movement. So people who are working to impact farmed animals. That's really where we're starting because we're so small and we just want to stay honed in. Mm-hmm. But as we grow, things I'm sure will continue to change.
So when you have organizations that come to you for guidance or consulting, and if you said this already, forgive me, but are there organizations that are coming to you that have maybe nothing to do with animal rights, and they're just like looking to you as a source for information about equity and diversity? Or are they specifically all organizations within the animal rights field, plus they're looking for kind of equity and diversity consulting, or all over the place?
It's more of the latter. It's more
Okay.
primarily animal groups. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if you were doing any work for just like nonprofits in general, or.
No, we're really focusing in on the animals in the
Okay.
animal space.
Okay.
Farm animal space.
Got it. But like you said, as you advance, there'll probably be more things that continue to be kind of tagged on.
Right. And we have done some work with animal groups that don't have that, but that's our primary kind of bread and butter.
And that is just kind of like to start somewhere. Like you've got to start somewhere.
That's really where I have most connections.
Got it.
I think it's important to kind of start honed in so that you're not overcommitting yourself. We're so small that even with what we're doing now, we're completely stretched thin. So I think it's important to do something, really well and be specialized in it. And so I want to just bite off what I can chew, and
no, totally. I think I could learn from you, because I am most often, to keep with the analogy, taking too many bites.
Yeah.
Things I cannot chew, making too many promises. So I think that that's really beautiful to like know that.
Yeah. And then, like I said, I feel like we are overcommitted still, but we do need to have a focus, I think.
So since you, I think we've established you have this good sense of intuition and kind of checking in with yourself, is this something now that you've started your organization where you're like, yeah, this is it, like this is what I'm going to be doing for a while? Or do you see kind of growth or change happening soon?
I think it's really important in general for founders to not stay at organizations too long, or just executive directors in general.
Interesting.
I think it's really important to hand entities over so that we can build more leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when people stay at organizations too long, it stifles things. It stifles the ability for others to lead. It stifles the potential creativity. There's so many different opinions and viewpoints that can be brought in, and when only one person is at the top, that doesn't happen.
Right.
We're still, we're going to be 4 years old this year, so I'm not fully ready to make that transition, but I think at some point, I don't think that I'll be at Encompass my entire career,
right?
Or at least maybe I'll come back at some point. I don't have any timeline, but I think in general, founder syndrome is a very real thing. And I think people should be kind of cognizant of terming themselves out at some point, whatever that is. I would only do it when the organization is really, solid, and I feel like there is, it's the right time. Not to say that you should just do it haphazardly because you set a certain deadline and you just want to do it by that. But I really do love what I'm doing. I don't know what I might do next.
Right.
It's been a really interesting process to just learn myself I do so many different things that it's been really interesting just to learn about myself in that way. Like I said, I don't have any plans to leave, but I won't be here forever. I don't know.
I think that's really interesting. And again, just speaks to the level of self-awareness you have, talking about founder syndrome, because that is a real thing, like people who've been running organizations for 20, 30 years, or who have started organizations or whatever it is. And I can't imagine being in that position, figuring out when that time is right to go. But just the fact that you're kind of cognizant of it and thinking of it, I think is really shows that you are committed to the work more than your ego.
Yeah.
Which is a hard place to be sometimes.
It It is. It is easy to like fall into that ego trap. And I think, especially in the animal movement, we've seen a lot of that. And I really want to be conscious not to replicate some of those dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you feel like within the last 4 years of your working with Encompass, or actually probably for however many years you've been working in the animal rights movement kind of in general, have you seen shifts and change in the integration of, like you said, the global majority, and having those conversations more within the animal rights movement, and privilege and all that intersecting work? Have you seen that kind of come up more, or where are we at given your work?
Yeah, I definitely have seen more and more conversations, especially with the racial justice uprising after George Floyd's murder. I definitely feel optimistic. I see more and more white folks willing to grapple with this than ever before, which is huge. And at the same time, we do have a long ways to go. And so I kind of hold both of those at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. I have had to leave some of those online vegan spaces because they're nasty. Because it just doesn't feel, because no group of people is perfect. And because it just doesn't feel right to be in a space where you're arguing with people about equity and trying to kind of play oppression Olympics.
Right.
It's really, really odd to me. I guess that's what privilege does, right? And and I've had to grapple with that, and I've had to work through that, and I'm still going to. It's not like it's a check off the box. But it is interesting to be so blinded by that, and to be in a space or a group or a conversation where you're talking about, freedom for one species, and completely want to disregard racial inequity. It's pretty mind-boggling.
No, completely.
I am thankful for people like you who are willing to do that work, because I know that it's exhausting, and it shouldn't always have to be your job. But there's so much to learn, and I am so thankful for people like you.
Thank you. That's very sweet. Yeah, it is very exhausting. And it's not for everyone. And I think there are a lot of people who say, I don't want to be your teacher. And that's completely valid. And at the same time, I do think there do need to be some people who are, doing that teaching. And I'm grateful to be able to have the energy to do that, but while completely knowing that it's not for everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And not to, for white people, not to have the expectation that every person that's not white is ready to be their teacher, right?
Right.
And asking for those resources from people who are in that space to give it to them.
Yeah.
So if you had someone talk to you or reach out to the organization, or reach out to you, or whatever it was, that said, I am vegan, I am white, and I had no idea what should I look at, what should I read, where do I learn, like where would you point people to kind of start that journey of self-learning?
Yeah, we do have on our website, we do have a resources guide. So if you go to encompassmovement.org/resources, we have kind of collated a starting point. There's many other places one could start, but we have toolkits, articles, videos, podcasts, movies, books, a lot of different things that people can kind of pick and choose where they want to start. And that we got that question so often that we decided just to put it on the website. Previously, I had just like a PDF that I would send people. But I think it is important for people to start that journey introspectively, kind of give themselves a little bit of a base of knowledge before, just taking it to the next level. Because so much of this is about unlearning.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I'll put that in the show notes so people
Yeah,
can
please.
check it out, because, and I will check it out myself too, because I think that that's from people of color in my life, and just in general with everything going on in the world right now, have talked to me about not being like the first place you go for information, like
Right.
Google, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
start somewhere. So if there's a place to point people on this subject, I think that's really beautiful to hand them, like, okay, we've got this question before, here you go.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
That's really, really great. I can't wait to share that with people and to explore it myself as well. Um, who are kind of people in this movement that have been inspirations for you, or do you feel like you didn't see yourself reflected, so you kind of became your own inspiration, or maybe a little bit of both?
Good question. There are many people who I pull inspiration from, both in and out of the movement. Um, I think a big part of the problem for me was that I just didn't see myself or my full complete value system. There were a lot of people who held some values, but then not others. So even with just the creation of Encompass, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to pull what I view as the best from other spaces. So I do a lot of learning from racial equity practitioners in the environmental movement and the racial justice movement, even in the for-profit sector, from the political sector. I'm really trying to learn from many other spaces and bring the best of and just what's applicable to the animal movement. And similarly, in terms of, people, I feel that way. There's some people who I think do just such amazing work and are totally on point in one way. And maybe they are in other ways, I just don't know, because I just don't see that writing.
Right.
So I'm really trying to create an organization that focuses on this intersection of racial equity, racial justice, and animal protection. And at the same time, building an organization that values the whole human and try to create a good work-life balance and try to recognize that there's emotional labor that goes into this and all the, just all the things. And so, yeah, I haven't seen that in totality. I haven't seen an organization that really thinks critically about how we work with one another and internally in teams, and what does pausing mean, and what do sabbaticals mean, and what does taking time off mean, all of those things. And so, yeah, I'm trying to create an organization with that intentionality.
It's so interesting, or maybe it's not, because that's how the universe works, but that you brought up the idea of work-life balance, because on the podcast, I also do a short solo Sunday episode every week where I just talk about something on my mind, maybe 10-15 minutes. And literally yesterday's episode was, is work-life balance even still the goal? Because I've just been thinking a lot about how the idea of work-life balance, when we say that out loud, is just kind of silly.
Yeah.
And it's more about integration and daily practice, not like a 40, 50, 60 hours a week and then you have one day and that's balance or anything like that. So I think it's so funny that you brought that up, because it's been on my mind a lot, that I just am starting to really hate the way we talk about work-life balance in this Western society. It just doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for me. No. And all of these things are social constructs. The 5-day work week is a social construct. It really came out of the labor union movement. Yes. The 40-hour work week, similarly, it's like we hold on to these things, but we don't really know why. We just accept it as what it is.
Yeah.
And in other cultures, that isn't what it is. And I think that's also kind of rooted in capitalism and the hyper productivity mindset that we have, especially in the US.
And white supremacy.
Yeah. All of it. So yeah, I'm really trying to kind of be mindful of thinking critically about all these things, even the things that we really just take for granted. And I know it's not for everyone, and it's a really challenging thing because we are still a part of this movement, this society, and we're dependent on donors who are very bought into a lot of these ideals because they have benefited from it, which is why they are donors and in the first place. So it's definitely a lot of balancing, but I'm here for challenging it. That's really what I'm trying to do. So,
well, it sounds like you are, because something else that sparked in my brain when you said that was I went to this, my full-time job is working for a nonprofit. And so I went to this training about decolonizing nonprofits. And it was so interesting. And what struck me is exactly, I think, what people in a lot of more progressive movements feel, is that you're trying to make change while you're still operating within this system.
Yep.
And so that conversation was kind of like, okay, you want to push your nonprofit to be different and to not be maybe capitalist or whatever, but you still have to compete for donations. Yep. You still have to show why you are worthwhile. You should still have to compete with other places, being open a certain amount of hours or whatever it is. So it's like, how do you simultaneously, and this is rhetorical unless you have an answer, how do you simultaneously push those boundaries and change the system while still having to operate within the system to get your organization run?
Yep.
Oof.
Yeah. I don't know if you know of Voulet of Nonprofit AF, but he is a really amazing vegan man of color who lives in the Pacific Northwest, and he writes about this a lot. I highly, highly, highly recommend him. He's really, his short weekly newsletters that are like less than a 5-minute read.
Nice.
And they all focus on basically this very question that you just raised. So he talks a lot about what does it mean to be, a radical liberatory organization working within a inherently problematic system.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait to look him up.
Yeah. I just sent you his link as well. And I would highly recommend him. Everything he says, it just feels really on point for me. So recommend your listeners find him out, look him out too.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I feel like we've kind of gone all over in the best way possible. Those are my favorite interviews. Is there anything that you wanted to share or say, or anything that you feel like you haven't gotten space to share yet?
No, I think this has been a really great conversation, and just check out Encompass Movement if you're interested in learning more about us.
Sure. So why don't you share the places people can get a hold of you if they want to after this interview?
Yeah. So you can reach us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Encompass MVMT, short for movement. And our website is encompassmovement.org. Full word spelled out.
Awesome. I will put all of that in the notes and included with the resource page and some other fun stuff that you've shared.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm really glad we got to connect. I hope we continue to connect, because you are a really lovely human making a huge difference in the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would love to stay connected.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Consciously Clueless. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe wherever you're listening. If you want to help me get this into the ears of more listeners, send it to a friend, text it to a family member, or share on social media. Whatever you can do really helps me out. If you want to be read on air as a review of the week, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. If you haven't yet, head over to patreon.com/consciouslycarly and check out all the amazing things happening over there and the community that is being created. And finally, head to consciouslycarly.com/courses and hit up that new self-love reset course. Until next time.